Shining bright lotus. Welcome. Thanks for all being here, my friends. Today's talk is going to be about I'm calling it non-meditation. That's a term that I got actually from the Mahamudra, the yoga mod of non-meditation. And I've been pondering whether that's any different than the Zen term shikantaza, which is just sitting. And as when we're done with today, maybe you'll be as confused as I am about whether there's a distinction between these terms or not. But hopefully, it'll allow us to see some of the habits that we have around meditation and the way we learn meditation, and that'll, if my intention and my hope is that it helps you with your practice. So when I started with Hollow Bones, Junpo liked to say dharana, dhyana, samadhi. That was kind of his sort of a simplified version of what we were doing. And dharani, pure awareness, dharani, look. But dharani or dharana is basically concentrating on an object. So the Rinzai form that Junpo inherited, that he sort of turned it into no, right? Which comes from the first koan, does a dog have Buddha nature? Mu, and what mu is no, and no, of course, was no, to K-N-O-W, no to thoughts arising. But it really becomes a huato, which is a term for concentration. Just inhalation, no, exhalation, no. And when he would introduce Mondo with the bell, it would be listen. Okay, but listen is a word, but you can let the word go away and actually listen. So the words remind you to listen. So you listen. So notice in the meditation at some point I said, okay, now open up your field of listening awareness, because it turns out for many people the listening field is the easiest way to notice what's already present all the time anyway, pure awareness. So when we quiet our minds from all the noise, thoughts, or sounds, for me anyway, and I know there's research that shows this, you can kind of notice the hum of the universe. It's just here all the time that we're arising within this field. So dharana is the concentration leading to dhyana. Oh, I'm recognizing pure awareness. It's here, right now, within this service. We're realizing, right? Or in Awaken One's Vow, which says, stop. And the conditions, what are the conditions, circumstances arise upon ourselves? A field of pure awareness. A Christ, a Buddha, a Tara that arises. So that's dhyana. So we start to meditate, and there starts to be these little glimpses where the mind's quiet, and you're like, oh, I can, I'm noticing something else besides myself, besides the me. Right, and then of course, so I remember I'm doing the Junpo's little mini version. Dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Samadhi is when kind of like that settles. That's something that samadhi is if you go Google, go to Wikipedia and look at samadhi. Samadhi's got more definitions than I think than any word I've ever seen. I mean, it's used in the Hindu pantheon. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It's used by the Buddhists. It's a. Let's not go too far into samadhi, but for now, we're just going to say if I can actually settle and be just present for what's naturally already here anyway, or everywhere, or we're rising within this field of pure awareness, it's more than just a recognition. And that recognition is, there's terms for it in Japanese, in Zen, it's kensho. I realize that, this self is arising in this field of pure awareness. If that can stabilize a bit, it's samadhi. So that's the traditional way that I learned hollow bones, and there's a few people on this particular call who are around for all that. Um, and but and then in the last 10 years or so, there's been a bunch of Buddhist sort of, I would say, meditation technology that's kind of, I would say, it kind of clarified a few things for us. One of them is the Mind Illuminated book, which is Chuladasa. I mean, that was really introduced to us through Emyo because she's trained by Chuladasa, which is he's teaching Anapanasati, but it's a blended Anapanasati with a bunch of Vajrayana training in it. And in that, we start to learn terms like shamata, right? And shamata and vipassana. Shamata being concentration practice. So the way it really isn't any different than dharana. So if you're confused, or what are they different? They're kind of not. Okay. But if you look at the four foundations of mindfulness, shamatha's got a lot of activity to it. You start off with the body, and then you can start to do with attractions and aversions, and then you end up with dharmas, right? There's a whole flow and process there. But what it ends up being is that you get sort of stages where you can start to look at landmarks around your concentration practice. Okay. And then you can say, well, this is, I'm stabilizing. So when you hear me giving instructions, I'm sort of moving through the form. I use the elephant path, it's called, or the stages of calm abiding, or stages of tranquility, or the elephant path. There's a painting that shows the relationship between the mind as the elephant and the monk who's going to prod it or cultivate a relationship with the minds that eventually we are sitting together. So that's all basically focusing the mind. But what I noticed after spending a lot of time on Zen, and particularly in the Rinzai form, but in the Soto form too, interesting enough, because I'm training right now in a Soto form, is there's a I'll say it this way, there's a dearth of instructions. Say it another way, it's distinctly lack of instructions, right? That's actually a very Zen way of doing it, because talk gets in the way of having the experience. So you're sort of left to fend for yourself to, mess with your mind. Now, so one of the ways of messing with your mind is to have a huato, a dharana, a phrase. Another is to give yourself a wonderful koan, which gives you just about enough information. I better not touch anything, or my mic will go off, to give you nothing to think about. Let's think of one right here. I got a few of them right here, right? A monk asks Joshu or Zhao Zhao, what is the meaning of Bodhidharma coming from the West? Zhao Zhao says, the cypress tree in the garden. Okay, think about that for half an hour or two or three or four. Okay, gives your mind something to do, right? It's a concentration practice in some way. So that's kind of the Zen, the Zen way of doing it. And of course, there is this way in which the Vipassana part, now moving from concentration, shamatha, dharana, to dhyana, there starts to be this sort of like a different experience happening. One that is very natural, one that is very timeless, one that has no boundaries, and one has to begin to sort of get comfortable, like our nervous systems have to get used to that experience. So for those who are familiar with Mondo facilitation, so you start to become familiar with it in the fifth koan. What is this like? What are you like? What are we like at this level of awareness? Because Jumpo's technology was, I need to engage this ego mind to get enough descriptors to help stabilize this larger field so I can remember and choose it. Seventh koan, right? I can use my mind to remember it. Why do I need to use my mind to remember it? Because we seem to have forgot about it along the way. Or you could say that because of the way life is designed, we, are preoccupied with, making dinner and feeding the kids and living our life and trying to survive, sometimes troubled times, right? So we habitually didn't pay attention to what was here already all the time. And, if we could sort of make up a story that if we just had parents that pointed it out to us all the time, maybe we wouldn't have lost our skills. But that's just a story too, because if they pointed it out all the time, we'd probably tell them we don't want that anyway. It's the nature of parents. We got to find it ourselves. So the realization, the vipassana, right? The vipassana is, oh, there's something more than just me. Well, I mean, you can do the big three realizations. There's impermanence, there's suffering, and there's no self. Well, no self doesn't mean I'm not me and you're not you and we're all not each other. No self means that there's something else besides this identity that I walk around in this bag of skin, that I think there's something else here besides just Ekai or Nanda or Hakui or Engo. It's just the four who are on the top of my screen at this moment, right? We're each selves, but we're in a larger collection that is empty of selves. Some folks call that God. Buddhists call that emptiness. They call that pure awareness. They call that a lot of things. Okay? But some of the qualities are, which is how I got in this little piece, was timeless, peaceful, eternal, imperturbable. It's a nice one, imperturbable. But the self needs to do enough to get used to this experience of what's here all the time. That's the practice, right? That's the practice, is can I put enough fuel in the engine of recognizing this that it starts to be in my field all the time? Okay, so we sit down, we meditate, we go on 8-day retreats, we wake up at 5 in the morning and meditate, 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 meditate. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And we want to start to recognize that that dharana, that focus, that concentration, that samadhi is just the method for getting there. It's not the there. It's not separate from the there, because the there's all the time. But let's not mistake it. So therefore, we want to make sure that as we become more skillful at meditating, we're sort of easing up on the concentration practice, and we're allowing ourselves to simply be present to what's already arising. So that in just sitting. So I'm going to read a couple things. So Huang Zi is sort of oftentimes the Chan Zen practitioner who they gave responsibility for kind of creating shikantaza. He calls it silent illumination. This is the 11th century. He says, The field of boundless emptiness is what exists from the very beginning. You must purify, cure, grind down, or brush away all the tendencies you have fabricated into apparent habits. Then you can reside in the clear circle of brightness. All right. So the practice is that grinding down. Okay. It's like moving through the me that's getting in the way. But we're not getting rid of me. We're just getting it out of the way so we can have the experience and we can both coexist together. Okay. In this field, birth and death do not appear. The deep source, transparent down to the bottom, can radiantly shine and can respond unencumbered to each speck of dust without becoming its partner. The practice of true reality is simply to sit serenely in the silent introspection. So that's a non-meditation, is it not? The practice of true reality is simply to sit serenely in silent introspection. So the invitation is to practice your meditation, your concentrations, and it's almost like you could put a bell on your timer and say, when this bell goes off, I'm going to invite myself to just sit here for the next 10 minutes and be with it, whatever it is. Right. Actually, in Chuladasa's language, is that you have to let go of effort. And he says this is one of the hardest things that modern people have. They work so hard to quiet their mind that in order to be with what's here, they have to unlearn that efforting, non-meditation. Okay. And so I've been working on this for the last 6 months. And you know what starts to happen? Maybe you start to daydream. Right? And your mind goes, you see, you're daydreaming. And it's like, so what? That's okay. That's the interesting thing. If you actually do it, whatever arises is okay. You don't have to have this like, I get, oh, no, it says in the books that I'm not supposed to. Oh, is that distraction? Is that forgetting? It's actually for 10 minutes just being here with whatever is here. And as you do it and as you concentrate, as you practice and letting go, it'll get quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter, actually, because all that grinding down that we each do every day by our having this practice, it adds up. The mind gets quieter. And sometimes it's not quiet because it's not a quiet day. Something's happening. And other times it's like, oh, it's really quiet today. So a different teacher, right, who's not so Zen, this is Tilopa. He's a 9th century, has these 6 characteristics of non-meditation, and these are kind of fun, right? So I'm going to invite you to actually, this is a fun one. I want you to close your eyes and just listen to this, okay? And just, you don't have to do anything. You just have to sit and let this float through you. Don't recall. Don't recall. Don't imagine. Don't imagine. Don't think. Don't think. Don't examine. Don't examine. Don't control. Don't control. Just rest. Rest. Don't recall. Let go of what has passed. Don't imagine. Let go of what may come. Don't think. Let go of what is happening now. Don't examine. Don't try and figure anything out. Don't control. Don't try and make anything happen. Rest. Just rest. For those who were closed, eyes closed, you're welcome to rejoin us. So, of course, when you say those things, then your mind does all those things. But I think you get the idea of non-meditation from it, huh? It's like, how do I rest without all that activity? Right? So as I wrap up and allow us to have time to get into small groups, I think, Joseph, can you do groups of 3, I think? Might be a 2, but I think don't go there yet. But I'll give you a sec. But as we sort of wrap up, what I'm suggesting is that there's a concentration practice, there's a focusing of the mind, you call it dharana, you call it shamata. And then as we mature and as we grow and as we start to have those experiences of dhyana, we need to actually allow ourselves to unlearn all that efforting and just rest into the empty, pure aware state. I'm calling that non-meditation, and I'm allowing us to make that distinction because there's a lot of joy there too. So shining bright lotus.